Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast. My name is Tim Votapka, and on behalf of Prosperity Plus and FSPA, I want to thank you all for joining us today as we give you a great look at your future in the financial and security world. Before we start the presentation, let me cover a couple of very quick housekeeping points. First off, I want to give a very big shout out to FSPA for giving us the airtime today to present this webinar to you. We know you have other tasks, meetings, and airline carriers to choose from, so we're grateful you decided to join us today. Everyone viewing today will be muted before and during the webcast. I know that may seem harsh, but it just keeps things moving along and allows us to cover a lot more ground in the time we have available. Your thoughts and questions are actually very important to us, so please feel free to tap any questions that come to mind into the little dialog box on your screen, and we will cover these later on during the Q&A part of the webcast itself. The other pre-show announcement has to do with your feedback, so please pay attention to your inboxes later on this afternoon. We will be sending out a feedback survey invitation after the webcast. This survey just takes a couple of minutes, and it does come with a free download of the slides from the PowerPoint you'll see today. So please do us a favor and let us know what you thought of the webcast. And when you see that survey later on, click on it and take a couple of minutes that we're asking for there. All right, so anyway, with all that said, let's get to the webinar and to the management expert himself, the one who can help you predict a bigger, brighter future, the president and founder of Prosperity Plus, Jim Kars.
Boy, that's an awful lot of pressure to put on me before doing a presentation here with that kind of intro. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for carving some time out of your day to talk about the future of where things are headed. I know it's something that is sometimes maybe not as easy to talk about as we want to, or as easy to look at and confront, because like it or not, things are changing. And obviously there's been a big evolution with all industries as we've moved more into the internet world and to apps and all these things that go along with it. So those things obviously have an impact on things that we do. As far as agenda, what we're going to cover today for the hour that we have together, I'm going to start out with an introduction. We'll find we always have some new folks on the line, so I want to give you a little background on myself, my company, and the management system that we work with. Then I'm going to get into specifically why is this concept of evolution within a business so important, and then really focus on the really driving point of the presentation is going to be looking at what do you need to do to be successful, and I'm going to walk you through a very specific tool, and I'm going to use that tool to highlight all different parts of the organization that need to be considered when you're looking at an industry that's evolving, or when you're looking at the potential of diversifying into some different product offerings, as I know a number of you folks are. I'll give you a little heads up in advance. There's a point in here too where I'm going to look for some feedback. I'm going to ask you a little bit about what are the things you're doing now, what are you planning, and what are you looking at. And one of the reason for that is I want to make sure that I can take some specific thoughts and ideas that you folks have and tie it into that second part of the presentation of looking through the organization. And then we'll talk a little bit about, okay, what are the next steps, and then open up, as Tim said, at the end for questions and answers, and we'll stay on the line as long as we need to answer whatever questions there are. Again, my name is Jim Kars. I know I've met many of you at the past FSPA conferences. I always enjoy attending them. You guys have a great group. I've been in the office systems world, so a very related industry, for just 31 years at this point, which seems crazy that it could time pass that fast, but it does. And my background is interesting. It's varied. I started out for the first part of my career in sales and sales management, and then I ran a district and a branch. Then I spent some time with a manufacturer for about 10 years, kind of learning from a different viewpoint how dealers and resellers operated. And then from there, I spent a couple of years as a director of operations of a $40 million dealership back here in New York. And then started Prosperity Plus, my company now, back, 16 years ago now, which again seems crazy that it could go that fast. What we do as an organization is, our focus is that we like to provide real world tools for improving profit, cash flow, and growth. And I think you're going to see as we go through this one key tool we're going to talk about today. I think it really actually touches on all of these points of how do you drive your profitability, how do you preserve and drive cash flow, and how do you grow a business, especially in an evolving industry. We also offer support with marketing and promotion programs. So, one of the things we've been doing a lot of recently is actually acting as an outsourced marketing department for folks that really don't have the budget to go out and hire somebody to do it internally, but really want to get the type of results that you can get with the right expertise in place. We also do mergers, acquisitions, and succession planning. That's also been a pretty big part of the business recently, just with all the changes in the industries that we work with, as well as just the number of folks that are reaching that stage in life that they're looking at that. And then a big chunk of what we do is consulting programs, and that's what we're going to kind of focus around here, is that the management of the organization. And what we do is we combine the industry experience with the management system called the Hubbard management system. And I'll take just a minute here and introduce that before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. The Hubbard management system was developed by a gentleman by the name of L. Ron Hubbard. You may know that name. He actually is the author of a book called Dianetics back in 1950 that kind of went into what was termed the modern science of mental health and looking at the mind and whatnot. Also the founder of the Church of Scientology. We're obviously here today talking about business, but Hubbard did a lot of different things. His goal in life really was to improve conditions for mankind in general. And one of obviously, Dianetics and Church of Scientology were a piece of that, but he also did a number of other programs, put together a program called Narconon, which is probably the most successful drug rehabilitation program around. A program called Criminon is designed to reduce criminality and help criminal reform. Applied Scholastics, which is something to help reduce illiteracy around the world. And then one that's gotten a lot of attention recently, as a matter of fact, I just got back today. I spent the last week in Tampa. I happened to be in Tampa as Hurricane Irma rolled in there. Thankfully, by the time it got that far, it wasn't too bad. I know there are other parts further south in Florida that are still feeling the devastation from that. And actually, this program, Volunteer Ministers, is very much similar to Red Cross, but in a way that focuses on getting things organized. And it was pretty neat to see some of the responses that happened around there, in really getting things set up with an organization structure to actually help in the face of a disaster. So just an interesting point to note. Another thing that I like to touch on is that, Hubbard's background. He was actually trained as an engineer at George Washington University. And the reason I think that's important is that he took that engineer viewpoint to solving problems and issues within organizations. And when we talk about this idea of, okay, how is the industry evolving? How do we as organizations need to evolve? We need to have somewhat of a scientific idea and viewpoint as to how to approach it in order to get the results that we want to achieve. So you'll see as we go through, again, this key tool we're going to use called the organizing board, how it really touches on all parts of a business and really does give that organized approach to it. But what a lot of people don't know, and just touch on this quickly, is Hubbard also created probably one of the largest, if not the largest, bodies of documented management technology that there is, of how do you manage and run an organization in order to achieve the goals that you're looking to achieve. And again, the key thing that we're going to cover here is going to be one of the tools from that, and I'm going to take it and tie it into how it handles or works with the evolution and diversification that you may be considering in the business. So with that, let's jump into the first part of this presentation, which is, why is evolution so important? Why should we be looking at evolving in a business? And I came across this illustration that I think, to me, summed it up very nicely in one concise picture, and it has to do with change. And basically, what this says here is that change, a bend in the road isn't the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. And I really wanted to open with this because I think first off, it's a little bit of an attention getter because you can see that you don't make the turn, the outcome isn't going to be what you want it to be. And I think that's an important piece what we have to look at. There are things that are changing within the industry that we don't have any control over that. That change is happening. It's going to happen whether we want it to or not. It's a matter of how do we see it, understand it, and then plan for it, and then work our way through it, so we don't wind up sliding across the pavement on our back, wondering what the heck happened here when there was a big turn, and we just failed to make that turn. So the reason I think that's such an important thing to look at, and I'm not trying to get anybody kind of thinking too much in their own head right now, or looking at what they've done or not done or whatever, but I've seen too often folks kind of just get in the groove of what they're doing and don't look up far enough ahead to foresee what's coming, that they can get themselves in trouble. So it's important that we just understand what is happening in the industry, and where are things evolving, and what do we need to do. I also found that to go through a couple of examples helps drive the point home a little better, and maybe give some similarities and things to refer to. But in general, we're not the first industry that's had to go through some major changes. I ask you a question here. How many of you used to use yellow pages? Right? I mean, I know I did. It was you had you lived with yellow pages. Anytime you needed something, you went and you got that book out and you flipped through the book. You went to the section for whatever service you were looking for, and that's how you got that service. Now, to this day, at our office, I think probably twice a year or so, we still have a group that comes around and delivers yellow page books. And the interesting part is when that day when if you walk out and you go to throw something into the dumpster outside, you see it's full of yellow pages. So there are some folks in that industry that haven't realized that that's changed. There's been a big evolution. Now there's some that things have moved online. Today, if you want to find something, you don't go to yellow pages. You go to your computer, you go to your smartphone, and you bring up your web browser, you probably Google, and you just Google, it's become a verb now to Google something. So, you had a lot of folks that were in that business, and it was a huge business. I mean, I'm sure many of you, if you look back at how much you were spending on your own yellow page advertising, and just think about how that multiplies out, it was a very big business that is now, all but extinct. Another one, how many of you used to rent VHS videos? I know, for me, it was, Friday afternoon, you had to try to get over to Blockbuster a little bit early if you wanted to get the new releases before they were all gone. And you look at the different businesses that were there, talk about Blockbuster, Blockbuster at this point is history. But that doesn't mean that people aren't watching movies. And if you look at it, it's pretty easy if you think about it. Who was the one that figured that out early? Well, it was Netflix. At the time when you had VHS, and then it went from VHS to DVDs, you had Netflix just kind of getting into that, and they were looking at a different process of, we'll send a DVD to your house, then you just send it back when you're done. And then they realized that, okay, now we got to go to this live streaming. And because they could see the road was turning, it's at a point where they've become, now the de facto standard, where I think during the VHS days, Blockbuster was the name that everybody knew. That was the thing that was talked about. But now, it's Netflix. You hear Netflix over and over and over, because they understood what was coming in the industry, and they were able to make that change and that turn with the evolution, and then continue to be viable. And then the last one, real quick, I think drives this point home as well, is, how many of you used to have a beeper, a pager that you wore on your hip or kept in your purse or whatever? I know I did, but I can't remember the last time I saw one. I'm sure there's probably a few here or there still out there. And if you think about it, back at the time when, those beepers and pagers were big, when you walked into a shopping mall, there was stores and kiosks and things completely dedicated to that product and the accessories and everything that went with it. It was a very big business. And there are a lot of folks that were in that business that are now gone. And the thing that I think really ties all of this together, in each of these different examples, is that there were folks that figured out what industry they truly were in, and there were other folks that didn't figure it out. Using the beeper thing, for example, there were a lot of folks that thought they were in the beeper business, but in reality, they were in the mobile communication business. And when cell phones got to the point where it wasn't carrying around a bag or a big brick, and it didn't cost $700 a month. I think that's what I used to pay when I first got a cell phone. By the time all the bill got added up with all the minutes, everything, it was close to probably $700 a month. But so they figured out, the ones that figured out they were in the mobile communications business made that transition into mobile phones and flip phones, and now have evolved into smartphones, and they're still strong, viable businesses. The folks that didn't figure out that they were in the mobile communication business are no longer around. And if we take the VHS, Blockbuster kind of thought they were in the video rental business, of the actual hard copy of a video, whether it's on a VHS or on a DVD or Blu-ray, whatever it evolves into. But they didn't realize they were really just in the home entertainment business, meaning that being able to watch movies or other content in your home, right? So it wasn't so much that they had this physical thing, it's that the end product was that the consumer was taking this entertainment home. So when they figure out, you look at it, Netflix figure out, okay, this is at home, and they just kept building and figuring out how to do that. So understanding where the business is going, and the other thing that I will say before I kind of jump into the next piece is something that I've seen in the past probably 5 years or so, maybe 10, but closer to 5, is we used to have businesses that were very much siloed, and they specialized in a very specific area, and didn't usually wander out too far. But as business in general has been evolving, there's been a lot of diversification and folks that are in a specific business that have moved into other businesses. So if you're, let's say you're focused on primarily providing hard goods for banks, whether that be teller stations or vaults or the vacuum systems for drive-throughs or whatever that happened to be. Found a lot of folks that have, added other services into that. They've gotten into other things than what they were doing in that whole process of diversification. And I think that's something that's happened quite a bit. So we talk about why this whole thing of evolution, kind of brings to point that idea of diversification. That, when you have industries that are evolving, some of the first steps that will happen might be a diversification into something different as that evolution is happening. For example, if we go back to the thought of the pager companies at the beginning stages, if you were a dedicated beeper pager company and cell phones were coming around, in the beginning folks would have looked at that as saying, oh, we're going to diversify into doing cell phones. If you look at it now, you look at it and say, well, maybe that wasn't even really a diversification as much as it was just the business evolving. So I think there's different degrees of diversifying in a business where it could be something that's very similar and very related, which tends to lean more towards the evolution side, or it could be something that's completely unrelated. I've seen a couple of things that some of the folks we work with have done. One, some folks have started placing water systems, water filtration systems where you replace a water cooler with a filter system, or we've had some folks that have gotten into doing LED lighting in offices, offices or banks or wherever, where they'll go in and replace the old fluorescents with LEDs and offer savings. That's a pretty big diversification of a totally different offering. But there's some that are really tend to be more in line with more of an evolution. So I want to throw this out to you guys for a second and ask you, what areas have you diversified into in the past, couple of years? What are things that you've looked at doing differently, that you looked at adding on? And if you could take a minute, just type your thoughts into the chat box there. I could take some of those and work them into the presentation as we go through the rest of this here. And Tim, if you could read those out for me when they come in, that would be great.
Absolutely. Just might take a few seconds. You don't have any musical tunes prepared, do you?
I learned a long time ago that the best thing I could do when it comes to singing to other people was to not do it. That's typically my birthday gift to people when it's their birthday, is I don't join in to singing happy birthday. So what do you think, folks? We got some things you've diversified into? We getting some response here?
Not yet, no. We might have to do a little witness leading here. Here we go. Okay, hang on.
This is the two-way communication part of a webinar.
Okay, here we go. We've gone from a traditional products provider to electronic security, to ATM, and then coin and currency.
Okay. Any others that we've diversified into?
We are now transitioning into automation products for banks, while also doing what was mentioned above or earlier.
Right. All right, last call. Any others before we move on to the next question? And get ready, because I got a follow-up question for you guys.
Nope, that's it.
All right, so we'll move on. So the next question I'm going to ask you is a pretty simple one. Why have you chosen to diversify into some of those areas that you've diversified into? We don't need long explanations, just a quick little, thought on it.
The need to drive expansion, slow market conditions in certain areas, business opportunities, and the fact that we don't want to be stagnant, and a small niche does not provide a long life.
Yeah, so if you look at these, the similarity that you see is, understanding that either that the market is going to slow or contract, or that, you need to expand. I mean, those are the things, those are the things you want to look at, and those are the early signs of when it's time to start looking at how the business is evolving. And I will tell you, one for one, the folks that don't figure it out, what happens is their revenue drops off and drops off and drops off and drops off. And then they keep trying to find a way to cut back so that they can survive. And then it gets to a make break point where they just can't do it anymore. So, the fact that you guys are seeing that's obviously an important piece of this whole puzzle, is that, yes, revenue is not going to stay exactly as it is if things in the marketplace tend to change. And, certainly automation and, things like, electronic services and, ATMs and things like that are all different pieces of the puzzle that we can look at and see how they're going to work going forward. So, these are the reasons behind why we need to make sure that we're evolving and looking at a potential of diversifying. The next question is, well, okay, what creates success here? How can we successfully do this and make sure that we're going to get the results that we want to get? And really, it comes down to a couple of things. The first one is, if you want to be successful, you have to have the right plan. There's more to an industry evolution than just sales, and I see this with both evolution and diversification. Especially when you look at trying to get into maybe a new or a more updated product offering. A lot of times we could fall into this trap of thinking that, well, it's all just about sales. We just got to figure out how we're going to sell more of this. But it starts with getting some sales, but there's a whole lot more that you need to look at, and you really need a comprehensive plan if you're going to get results. And then the other thing that it really is factored upon is having the right people. And really the focus in the presentation here today is going to be more on the plan. But I think it's also important to understand when it comes to the people, something that you really need to look at as you're going through this process is, we found too often that the people that got you where you are today may not be the people needed to get you where you want to go. And I think that's something you have to keep in the back of your mind. And when I say it's the people that got you where you are today, it's the people in the general condition and state that they're in also. So in some cases, we found that as industries change and evolve, there are some folks that just that people don't figure out what they need to do to make the turn. They don't build their skills, their knowledge base, and their overall effectiveness and value to the organization, so that person who just doesn't evolve, doesn't have the same value, and winds up not being able to help you get to where you need to go. And then there's others that do. So what I found is there's two ways to look at this. If you've got people that aren't where they need to be, you're going to have to look at either, do they need to be replaced because they just can't be brought along, or do you really got to put a focus on getting them to understand what additional training do they need, what has to happen to get them to a point where they're evolving as well. And I think that the latter, the second one, to me is the preferable solution. It's like let's make sure that the people in the organization understand and that we're giving them the tools and we're giving them the opportunities to be able to learn what they need to stay with the curve of the evolution and not get left behind. Because one thing I've seen in industries that we work with before that have gone through these types of evolutions is you can wind up with the worst case scenario, and that is the employee who's been with you forever, whose skills have not come along at the pace that they need to, so they're lacking. They become one of your most tenured people, but one of your least skilled in the things you're doing. And it's completely upside down because they're also, because of the tenure, tend to be among the highest paid. So all of a sudden you get this situation where you could have somebody that's one of your more highly paid people that's able to do less and less of the type of work that's necessary to bring the business along. So you got to make sure you've got the right people, or at least the right plans to get those people to where they need to be in order to help you achieve what you're looking to achieve. So in creating this plan, it has to be something that's really workable. And what you need to do is you need to build it into your overall organization. Right? If you're going to do anything in the evolution of the business or the diversification of the business, it can't, as I said earlier, just be let's figure out how to go sell this new thing. Because that's just one piece of the puzzle. If you want it to really work and be successful, it needs to fit into the entire organization. So I want to take a minute here. I'm going to walk you through a tool that we use. I'm going to do it first. I'm going to give you just a quick overview of it, but then I'm going to walk you through kind of step by step in the different divisions of an organization and just give you an idea of some of the things to really start looking at and thinking about. So the tool is called an organizing board. It comes directly from this Hubbard management system. And the thing that's different about it is it's a different way to view a roadmap of a business. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the typical organization chart, which is a bunch of boxes and lines that gives you that hierarchy of who reports to who and how departments are broken up. But the problem with that is that it focuses on the people And especially during a time when businesses are evolving or diversifying, you can find that the functions start to change. So what this tool does is it makes the functions the focal part of the process. And I'm going to bring up a quick, I'm going to bring up a sample here for you. And again, as Tim said, if you fill out when you fill out the survey afterwards from this presentation, after filling out the survey, you're going to click on a link and you'll be able to download the slides. This document will be included in it. Now I realize you can't read, everything that's on here right now. I'm actually going to quickly walk us through each division here in a minute, highlighting specifically what happens in an evolution and a diversification. But basically what you've got is you've got an organization laid out into 7 divisions, each with their own key functions that they handle. And I think part of the brilliance of this document and this tool is that it's also laid out in a way that follows the natural flow of the business. That business actually flows through step by step here. And then when you get new business, it kind of drops back in here and continues to flow through. 2 other points just to note real quickly on this. It does still get the hierarchy as you would with a regular org chart. But the other thing you get at the bottom is that it also lists out what's the valuable final product or the expected outcome of each area, meaning, if this division does its job, what do we get from it? And then the last one is what are the statistics? How do we measure how well we're doing? So, like I said, I really want to take a minute here and walk through this document, but with a specific viewpoint of how would you apply it when you're considering what needs to be done in evolving or diversifying within the business. So I'm going to start with the first 2 divisions, Division 7, which is the executive, and Division 1, which is the communications area. So in this Division 7, the first thing is you got this we call the Office of the Owner. The responsibility here is to provide the vision and direction and the big picture for the organization. So here we're looking at, what would you have to do differently? Well, you've got to make sure you've got a plan for any new product offering that you're going to be getting into. Not just go and say, hey, let's try this and then go and buy some and hope you can sell it or get a vendor to authorize you or whatever. You got to select the products and the vendors. Then you want to do things like make sure you've got your comp plans and whatever else in place, right? So you look at the big picture. The next department here in this division is called Special Affairs, and the purpose here is to really safeguard and protect the organization, right? From a big picture. So we want to make sure that we've got good contracts with our vendors that cover us for the new product offerings we're going to have. You want to make sure you got sufficient insurance. This is something, especially if you're going to be doing anything that involves software or getting into your customers' networks, you need to make sure you've got the coverage, the proper insurance coverage for that. You look at if Equifax can be breached, you wonder, what could happen here. So, you don't want to be in a situation. I'll give you a very quick example. I have a client in the IT world that they were working on a server at a customer's location. The server was having an issue, and the technician, not thinking, just not sure why, but didn't have his head about him. And what he did is he took the server out, brought it back to the office, and worked on it at the office. Well, it happened to be that this was a benefits company, a health insurance benefits company. And because that server left the office, it immediately had to be considered as if there was potentially a breach. And every one of their clients had to be notified that there was a potential breach of their data. And it wound up, costing my client a bunch of money to have to pay for some of those notifications and things like that. So you may want to make sure you got the right insurance coverage. Make sure that you've got all your agreements and everything in place and that they're, covering you the way they need to be. Then, the next section here, the Office of the President, this is where you're actually laying out your specific plans. You need to make sure you've got detailed plans of how you're going to approach it from a sales standpoint, from a service standpoint, from an administrative standpoint, from marketing and promo and all the other things we're going to touch on here. Right? If we're going to be doing something new, we can't just say, hey, we got a product, let's go out and talk about it. We really need to have a plan of how are we going to be successful with it. Right, then you come to the next section here, human resources. We need to look at we need to get with our managers and look at the organization and determine what are the personnel needs going to be. One thing I can tell you is that, with any new offering, it tends to work best to have specialists that focus on that. Because if you take your current team, especially in sales, if you take your current sales team and you just add a new product offering to them, they don't typically sell more than they had been selling. They tend to sell about the same amount, but now they split it between the old and the new. That doesn't get you the result that you're looking for typically in the growth. So determine what are the human resource needs in sales and service and admin, and whatever else, and come up with a plan of how you're going to approach getting those candidates, getting them on board, getting them up and running. We look at the communications. This is communication coming in and out of your organization. A lot of people kind of don't think about the fact that something as simple as, if you're going to be offering some new services or products, your receptionist needs to know that you're doing that and what it's all about, because if they get phone calls, they need to know how to handle those phone calls. Right? If we're offering we have a new offering as well, maybe we want to add that to our on hold message so that it becomes an integrated part of what we're doing, not just this add-on that's not getting the attention and the thought that it normally would. The next one we get to here is information systems. That enterprise software that you have, whether you've got a system like an eAutomate or QuickBooks or Microsoft or whatever it happens to be, whatever that software is it going to be able to support what you're doing? If you get you're getting into things that are more software based, like if you're selling software, sometimes you'll need a different system to allow you to properly handle and track all of the service activities and whatnot that happen there, or the billing activities, or things like that. Your sales software, your customer relationship, your CRM software, is that set up? Do you have the data set up in there, or the spots to be able to collect things like who are the decision makers in this new product offering, and can you enter in who their current vendors are and products, and things that allow you to capture the data that you need to effectively go out and really sell this new offering or this thing that you're evolving into. And then you got to look at any other software requirements. Sometimes with certain products there may be specific software requirements that go with it. Real quick on inspections and reports, the statistics part of this, we need to make sure that we've got ways to measure our success and how are we doing with this new offering or this new evolution, because very often there's new things that we should be tracking. Especially if there's new product offering, there's always new things that we should be looking at of profitability or things like that. So then we come across to the next division here, division 2, promotion and marketing. We need to create a promotional and marketing strategy specifically around what it is we're evolving into or what products we're diversifying into. Like if you're going into electronic security, you may have to look at how are we going to promote that. It's totally different than what you had done before. So you got to look at, you can't necessarily just have everything you've done from a marketing and a promotion standpoint in the past and expect that it's going to translate into whatever this new offering is. So you've got to look at, do you have the right sales materials? Do you have the things you need to do if you're going to be doing direct mail and email? Is the new offering properly represented on your website? That's another one that I find happens a lot, is that, you get a website set up and it tends to stay pretty static. It doesn't get updated a whole lot as things change and evolve. And next thing you know, you've got, a whole different offering that you're putting out there. But yet, if you go to the website, it's totally devoid of that. It's not there because we haven't worked it into it. So we need to come up with an all-encompassing strategy of how do we make sure that it fits into everything that we're doing there. Right, the next department we come to is order entry and billing. If we're going to be selling products, obviously we need to be able to get them entered into our system and be able to invoice it and get paid, because that's why we're doing this. Revenue, if it doesn't come in the door as cash flow, doesn't really help a whole lot. So we need to make sure we've got the people in that department trained. Do they know what the new products are? Do they know how to place orders and track them? And do we have our products set up? Do we have the ability to invoice things correctly so that the invoices show what the end user is looking to see? If you're billing maybe in, let's say, for example, if it's a more of a software based or IT based or something like that, well, there might be blocks of time. Does your system allow you to invoice in blocks of time and be able to show those blocks of time? In contract administration, that's your ongoing service or maintenance type contracts. You need to look at those and see, are there things that need to be updated? Again, one of the common area that we've seen is, as you start to get more and more into the world of IT, the contracts need to be updated in a way that you've got language in there to protect you, that we're not going to do things within your network. We're not going to take things out of the building. You want to be protected that anything that you do, you're not liable for damages that it might cause somewhere else. You may have language in there that allows you to easily show a customer that if their problem is a network problem and not a problem with the device that you have on the network, that if you fix that, it's a chargeable service call. For example, they just upgraded a computer in their office from Windows 7 to Windows 10, and now all of a sudden the product that you got in there isn't working correctly with that. Well, it has nothing to do with what you installed. It has to do with the fact that they changed something in their environment, and you can't be expected to fix that for free because it was totally unrelated to you. So those things got to be worked into the contracts to make sure that you're not in a position either where you're not protected because something wasn't stipulated that needed to be, or that you're having to go deliver services that are viewed as not chargeable when they should be chargeable. And then the other one here in contract administration, I think is very important, is anytime you're getting into new offerings or you're changing anything about the offerings, you want to make sure that you are reviewing your profitability on a regular basis. Because when you're new to something, it's easy to incorrectly estimate what your costs are going to be, and you could wind up being way upside down. And if you're not looking at it regularly, you could wind up in a situation where, you might be bringing in new business, but it's at a loss, so it's actually hurting you. All right, the next one here on supplies, want to make sure that, are your people that handle supplies fully trained on anything that would need to be done if there's supplies to go with this new product? Are they going to be able to handle incoming calls? Do they understand what these products are? There's nothing more embarrassing than getting into something new and then having a customer call in. They get somebody on the phone, and that person on the phone, they figure out pretty quickly, has no idea what they're talking about because they haven't been brought up to speed because it was focused on the sales department. All right, when you get into Division 3 with finance, we got to make sure our AR people understand the invoicing when they're collecting on it and what the different charges mean and what are they for, so that if there's questions, they can answer that. In the payable side, things like, commissions are probably going to be different on new products. We need to make sure we got our new vendors and everything set up and whatnot. On material and assets, purchasing, we're going to be carrying some new product offerings or changing some of them. People who are responsible for maintaining your inventory need to know what that is so they can order stuff properly, they can maintain the right levels of inventory, and they know who the vendors are, they know the process. They need to be trained. And this is another one, I'll tell you, that I've seen too many times. A dealership decides they want to get into some new offering. They get it to the sales team comes in with an order, the order lands on somebody's desk, and they're like, I have no idea what this is or how to get it or where to get it, and then it becomes a mad scramble to figure this all out in order to fulfill an order that was just taken. And you got a customer that's, taking a shot on you with something that's a newer offering of yours. And now we're delaying the process because we're needing to teach people something they could have learned before but we didn't get it done until it landed on their desk and it was now an emergency. On the record keeping side, we get to the whole financial side. You want to update your chart of accounts. If you've got new offerings, you certainly want to have GL accounts that allow you to see that revenue separately so that it's easier to track it and see it. That would also go for your cost of goods so that you could quickly and easily determine what your profitability is on different product offerings. And then you want to make sure you've got the expenses, if there's separate ones that you want to be able to see, again, for this tracking purposes, that you have that there. And then any of the inventory things and whatnot. Come to Division 4, service. The service people certainly have to be trained. When calls come in, they need to know how to handle a call on that, and they need to know what they're talking about and what the products are and what they do and what the problems could be. We need to make sure that we've got the whole billing process down again, so that we know what's chargeable, what's not chargeable, and we need to know who is trained. The dispatch needs to know from our technical staff who's trained to do what when it comes to these new offerings. With the techs themselves in the actual service area, there's obviously training that has to happen. Again, I've seen too many instances where we get sales all excited about something, they go out and sell it, and then we realize we have nobody trained to install it and service it. So we've got to consider that up front. If we're getting ready to release something to the market, let's make sure we got our ducks in a row and we've got the people trained and ready to get out there and support it. Because again, there's nothing worse than selling a product and then having to figure out how am I going to get a tech up to speed. And then if you don't get them up to speed and now they're in installing it, it becomes pretty evident and obvious to the customer that this tech is kind of figuring it out as they go. So we want to have as much of that done as we can in advance. And then, in the warehouse, we want to make sure we've got, again, parts people understanding what are we going to need to maintain from a parts standpoint, what should we be stocking technicians with if need be. And, with these different offerings, is there any, what's the warranty process look like? We put a new product out and it has a problem, how do we claim the warranty on that and not wind up having to eat that cost when it shouldn't be ours to eat? All right, so the last two divisions we'll get to here in the quality division, the first section here is Department of Examination, is where we do a lot of surveying to find out, are people happy with our product and our service offerings? Obviously, anytime we're doing something new, surveying becomes even more important. We want to find out, what do people like, what do they not like about the experience, again, especially when it's something new to us, because we're learning it too. So the more feedback we can get from the customers, the better off we are. The whole correction area, that's being able to go in and take the stuff that we've learned from surveys or just learned as we go and make sure that we correct what we're doing and get it so that our offerings are more in line with what we want them to be and what our customers want them to be. In the training and enhancement, we got to make sure that we are looking at what training is needed for everybody, service, sales, and admin. Again, we tend to focus pretty heavily on the sales first, then usually service follows that. But it's important to also see, is there anything we need to do from the admin side to get them trained up and ready? And then finally, Division 6, which is our sales, we need to make sure the salespeople are trained, that the CRM is set up the way that it needs to be, that we've got prospects that we can go out and call on, that we've got a list of what are the questions that we should be asking them from a needs analysis type survey. How are we going to create proposals? What are those proposals going to look like? Are they going to require scope of work and things like that? In the sales support area, how are we going to help them with putting those things together? Do we have all the materials that we need in stock, the brochures, the presentations, whatever else? Do we have the ability to demo? Do we have our own internal demo facility ready, or our ability to go out and demo at customer sites or whatever? How do we show this product? And then lastly, here in the PR area of sales, that's letting people know who you are and what you do and what you're good at. We need to make sure that we can quickly get some, especially with new products, some customer references. Those first couple we put in, we want to be able to use them as references to build upon. And then we want to make sure that we've got, the ability to go out and talk about this at trade shows or, chambers of commerce meetings or, things like that, network meetings, so that we can, again, let people know this new offering, what we're doing, how we're doing it, or, what this evolution has brought about, and what it means to the end user and the benefits that we can bring to the table for those end users. So I realized, there's obviously an awful lot to cover here, and I just touched on, a handful of each of these items within the areas here. It's not by no means an exhaustive list, and this list will change and get modified somewhat based on what it is that you're doing. But the real point that I wanted to drive home, before we get into kind of wrapping things up here and summarizing, is really twofold. First, it's very important that you keep your attention to some degree out into the future of what's happening, and that you're looking forward enough to be able to plan and understand what the future is going to look like. If you're stuck completely and totally only in the here and now and the present time and just running on the treadmill of handling problems and issues and all that, that's the mentality that winds up with, the outcome of a Blockbuster or the outcome of, the beeper sales company, that all of a sudden they just, they had their head down running, and then by the time they stopped to look up, the business was gone and there was nothing left of it. So you got to keep looking up from time to time. My recommendation is you probably have 80% of your attention in the present time, the here and now, and 20% of it kind of out into the future of seeing what's there, learning what's there, getting yourself up to speed so that you can be ready to be at least with the curve, if not ahead of the curve, but moving with that curve and not being left behind. So, that being said, again, you look at all the different parts of your business and how it affects it. The question lead to is, where do we go from here? So, just kind of wrapping things up, we've seen, how evolving and diversifying really does touch every area of the business. It's not limited to just a sales thing or just a service thing. It touches every part of the business, and it needs to if you're really going to be successful. So you got to look at it and you got to work out your plans and your programs of, how are you going to handle each area of the business with this evolution or this new product. And I think you really need and want to be as specific in those plans as you can be. The more you can look at what's going to happen here and the more you can understand and really delve into the specifics of it, the better chance you're going to have of creating the outcome that you're looking to create. And then you have to really, really commit to executing on the plans. And that, that's probably the hardest piece of this whole puzzle, of figuring out what do you want to do, looking into the future a little bit and saying, okay, what's our evolution going to look like? And if you decide, okay, we're going to go in this direction, we're going to do this, then you really have to, once you've decided that, then you really have to commit to executing the steps that it takes to really incorporate it throughout the business and make it successful, not allow it to be a thing like, well, we'll see if it works or if it doesn't work. It'll work to the extent that you make it work. And then you need to, on a regular basis, step back and really look at your progress. And that's important, in my opinion, for two reasons. One, you want to be able to step back and look at it so you can make sure that you're evaluating properly and doing the things you need to do and correcting as you need to correct. But the other reason why I find that it's very important to step back and look at your progress is that when you are changing things, it's easy to fall into this kind of thought and belief that we're not making much progress until you step back and really look at it and realize, you know what, we actually got a lot more done than I thought we did when you actually look at it and quantify it and add it all up. So it's important to do that, to acknowledge where you've done well, but also see what needs to be tweaked and where you could do some things differently. So finally, I can tell you, if you look around, I'm sure you see some of your peers and you look at it and say, some have, been successful in evolving or diversifying their business, and others have not been that successful. Those that I can tell you that have been successful, they've built it into their full business model. It hasn't been just a sales thing or something like that. It's really worked across the board. An important part, they made it a part of their culture. It's become a part of who they are. And honestly, the evolution needs to be part of the culture. The fact that we are a company that's going to look at the future and stay towards the leading edge of that, not necessarily what we refer to as the bleeding edge, where you're so far out in front that you're the one who's making all the mistakes that everybody else is learning from, but be out towards the front. And things that they've done well, that they've created well thought out plans, and most importantly, they've executed on them. That the best plan in the world that doesn't get executed really doesn't do a darn bit of good. And honestly, a half-baked, not even fantastic plan that gets executed really well will be much better than the great plan that had very little or no execution. So I think, just to kind of wrap it up, I would say, the key is step back, take an honest look at where you are right now, and have you made the commitment that you need to succeed moving into the future? And if you have, great, keep doing it. If you haven't, it's not a big deal. You just say, okay, now I realize what I need to do, and start putting some of that attention into the future, and start putting some plans in place, and take these steps little by little. The beauty is it doesn't have to happen all overnight. You can do it in steps. If you do it in steps, not only does it work better and you get better results, but it's a lot easier to manage, and it doesn't become as overwhelming. So I know we covered an awful lot at a pretty quick pace here in an hour, but let's take it, throw it out to questions. If you have questions, you want to type them into that chat box. We'll take them up one by one here as they come in. In the meantime, also let you know if there's anything that you want help with. We're here. You got my contact info on the screen with the phone number here at the office, as well as my direct email address. And then finally, before we get to questions, maybe better to do this now, but just want to take a minute and thank BJ and FSPA for again doing the great job that you guys do as an organization, and also for giving us the opportunity here to spend an hour with you and hopefully give you some things that'll be helpful for your business. And with that, Tim, let's take up questions.
Excellent presentation, very beefy, and your points about doing it in steps are taken well to heart. We've seen a lot of folks have to struggle and often forget the fact that you don't have to do it all at once. A couple of questions for me, actually, on this one. Yes, we will provide the deck. All you got to do is a little homework on your own. You got to do that survey that I'll send out a little bit later on this afternoon, and once you do that, I'll route you to a landing page where you can definitely pick up a copy of what you saw on screen today. This webinar was also recorded, so we will more than likely make that available as well in case you straggled in a couple of minutes late and wanted to catch the very beginning, or even share it with some other folks in your staff. I'm going to unmute BJ real fast here, and BJ, I'm going to give you a chance to provide your rebuttal of any kind or questions you want to put to Jim.
No, this is this again is a subject really close to my heart, because as running FSPA, and you can kind of see as you look out at the members, the suppliers and the dealers, those that are moving forward and evolving. And since 2009, when the industry got so tough, you could really see those that couldn't adapt and change slowly, no matter how hard they tried to keep doing what they were doing and how successful they used to be. They went out of business or were forced to sell their business. And it, was not an insignificant number. It was probably a good 10% of our membership, that these businesses that had once been at the forefront of the industry and well respected and well run are suddenly going out of business. And it's almost become like a matter of, accepting the fact things are never going to go back the way they were, And then it went to a whole new level because things are changing so quickly. And what the financial institutions are looking for from their solution providers is changing all the time. They're looking for us to be cutting edge and to bring them new products and to help them make these changes. And it seems like this process is accelerating. And if you can't evolve your business and you can't motivate your employees to accept this change, you know, I understand the salespeople. They don't want to go down a path with something new and shake up that relationship with that customer and you know, get in trouble for some new thing they tried. I totally get where that's coming from and why the salespeople feel that way. So it really is up to, you know, the people on this call, the people who are listening to this, to make that change and make it part of the culture, like Jim was talking about. And I watched that be so hard for some of these companies to do. So this is just a really important subject to me and something I feel like is a mission of FISPA to be able to help businesses change and help try to find new suppliers and new supplier members that are bringing these things to the membership. So I just want to thank you, Jim and Tim, for your effort today and bringing the subject matter to us, because it's exactly what I think Mission 1 is right now today for this group.
Oh, great. You're very
welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to do it.
All right. At this point, we do not have any questions on the board. We will get that survey out a little bit later on this afternoon. And obviously, things get triggered in the mind afterwards. So feel free to join us and, get in touch with us later on or any other point in the time frame, and we'll help you out any way we can. Jim, well done. Thanks so much for putting this all together, and I'll let you sign out.
Yeah, thank you everybody for attending.
Right.
And
thank you.
And you know, having just gone through this whole Irma thing, you know, thoughts and prayers out to everybody in the path of the next one that's coming through the Bahamas and that area. It's a crazy time.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.